little community. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Oops, where did it go? Yeah, lucky birthday. Yeah. Okay, at 02:55:16, you can hear, and, this is another part. If you have headsets, put your headsets on or put your earbuds in. Okay, we're gonna take a second here. Put your headsets and your earbuds on. Okay? At 02:55:16, and I did a bunch of replays here. And this microphone is facing the house. With no, in general, awesome birthday lessons. I don't have it. With no, in general, awesome birthday. Yeah, lucky birthday. I've listened to this thing 1,000 times. I'm going to submit to you. Somebody is saying, stop. Now, who that is, I have no idea. Very carefully. Listen to it again on replay. You have driver lessons? I don't have it. No, in general. Awesome birthday. Yeah, lucky birthday. You have driver lessons? I don't have it. No, in general. Awesome birthday. Yeah, lucky birthday. You have driver lessons? I don't have it. Okay, now this one, I'm going to play it again. Listen. 19, go. Okay, 021. Karen, what do you think? 19, go. Okay,
This came up on the police officer on the Banfield alcohol stop. His body cams. Stop it, stop. This is 2 minutes or 3 minutes after the girls made their last call to Jack D. What was Jack D doing? Was he sleeping? Was that when the murder started? Sounded more like it was on the outside of the house than the inside. That was definitely a female. This is speculation only. This is what was online in the beginning. Somebody wanted to share this, and I think it was about Jack D. So the person was saying that it was Jack D that was suspect number 1. This is just speculations. In the beginning of the case, many people were attacking Jack D and Jack Showalter. They're trying to say it's a common tactic. I know the people who've been ruled out can always be called in or can be suspects again. But the question is, are they just pinging this on Brian Christopher Coburg? Jack D will fall into the category of crime of passion, like the mayor said. KAYLEE was leaving him. She's moving to Austin. She's going to continue with her dreams. She got herself a dream job. She's going to visit Europe. She's taking Murphy, the dog they share custody with her. Where was Jack D that night? And why didn't he answer any of their calls? Couldn't have fallen asleep so quickly. He was at the corner club. What did Maddie tell Adam, and Adam must have told Jack D? Did Jack D come back and attack the girls, allegedly? So this is actually how it started. This was the first page. So this is speculation only. Look at how swollen his eye and his face looks. His lips, his nose. Could have been from all the crying, but I doubt. You have Jack Showalter on the left and Jack D on the right. The double Jacks. I personally believe one of them have to be involved, if not both of them. Their alibi sucks like Brian Koberger's. They both were in the corner club together with Adam. Did Jack D send Jack S to escort the girls? Was Hoodie Guy just helping the girls? He doesn't seem to be very friendly with females. With all the S harassments going on, he's been kicked out of his fraternity. There's always been rumors going on that Jack S got kicked out of his fraternity due to Xana and Eaton. That they reported him allegedly. That shows he could have had motives on all four of the victims. They both the Jacks had a motive, and the Sigma Chi boys. Jack John Showalter standing there like a statue. I wonder what he has in his pockets. That really looks like a K-bar, allegedly. He has something sharp in his pocket. We have Saeed here, one of the fraternity boys, who was at the alcohol body cam stop with the police. It seemed to be a busy night. When the Banfield alcohol stop was going on, there was a car that you can see above with the headlights parked in front of the girls' house at 3 a.m. And that wasn't Brian Christopher Kohlberg. This is exactly where the figures were running from 1122 Kings Road side down towards the small pink brown building and right to the Sigma Chi, the Sigma Chi fraternity. This is the Taylor Avenue. And it was the police's body cam who saw the figures running at 3:12. Here are the figures running. That's where the small pink house was. Yeah, now you see the figures. 4, I think they're 4 or 5. This is the most important thing in the case that the prosecution ain't talking about, or the defense attorney.
For the entail confusion over the gravity of the situation, fingers in the Moscow Police Department pointed to the dispatcher. But the truth is the dispatcher was simply following procedures. All the town's 911 calls are routinely routed to Pullman, about 10 miles west in Washington State, and home to Washington State University. That's where obviously Brian Christopher Kohlberg is from, where they're handled by the civilian employees of a municipal agency called Whitcomb 911. The calls come in from the local Whitman and Ascertain counties as well as the city of Moscow. 2 universities with a total of about 42,000 students and 70 additional municipals and county agencies. And the dispatch crews local newspapers report are severely understaffed. The overtime schedules often add up. To a grueling 20 hours each week. In fact, the Dispatchers Guild has complained that our ability to uphold public safety is at risk. And things only get worse on football weekends. Therefore, when the callers are agitated, rather than risk injuries, delays by probing for details, the responders swiftly assigned a generic explanation. Unconscious person is one of the standard catchphrases. It can mean precisely what it says, or it could be shorthand for something more ominous. It was 11:58 a.m. on Sunday, November 13, 2022, when the notifications of an unconscious person at a residence on 1122 King Road, Moscow, was passed on to Sergeant Shane Gunderson. Gunderson, who on the day was midway through a 12-hour shift that had started at 6 a.m., was running the operations division at the sparkling modernistic. It had opened barely 11 months earlier, Southview Avenue Police Headquarters. That is Mr. Shane Gunderson, who received the 911 dispatcher call saying that there was an unconscious person at 11:58 a.m. Prior to the moment, he told people his tour had been long and slow, a elongated weekend. Let me move to the next page since it's not clear here. Prior to the moment, he told people his tour had been long and slow, a languid weekend morning, punctuated by the chimes of the town's many church bells tolling solemnly in the wind. Yeah, it was a Sunday. In fact, he spent a good deal of the desk-bound Sunday mulling something other than police business. Gunderson had been avidly mapping out in his mind a strategy for the 8th hour or easily more. Trek to the summit of Mount Burrow. He and his friend from the University of Idaho Psych Department had been planning Sunday mulling something other than police business. Gunderson had been avidly mapping out in his mind a strategy for the 8th hour, easily more. Trek to the summit of Mount Burrow. He and a friend from the University of Idaho Psych Department had been planning for the spring. It's Idaho's highest point, and the trail up the southwest reach to the 12,662-foot summit is a steep, hard climb, and he'd admit after a beer or two it was just the sort of challenges he'd been missing lately. I don't understand why it's so important about hearing what Mr. Gunderson does in his free time. Now that he had had his sergeant stripes police work and more about disturbing memos and filing papers than getting out into the field. That bothered him. Nearly 10 years on the force, he still wanted to be gung-ho officer who had joined up straight out of Lewis Clark State College in nearby Lewiston and worked his way up from patrolman. In his early days, he'd distinguished himself as a hands-on cop, someone out in the streets doing what the Moscow PD calls community policing. Back then, he'd scored a lot of points both in and out of the department, as well as winning the Office of the Year honor in 2017, when he single-handedly planned and organized a hot dog barbecue, bringing together the cops and the local school kids he was from the area growing up in. Back then, okay, we've read that. Okay. When the 911 came in, Gunderson had a corporal and 2 other officers on duty to assist with patrol. He could have left the response to them. He'd tell people with a hint of embarrassment, had no intimation or something out of the ordinary. The morning he was simply eager to break the monotone, and as always he felt strongly it was important for him to get out on the street, people could see him. He swiftly decided he'd go to the scene too with his officers. It was a quick trip, the roads leading into the university. Gunderson's black and white cruiser pulled up behind the next row of cars parked in the driveway of the Austria cantilevered house on King's Road. He immediately knew something was very wrong. It was the noise. There wasn't any, just an eerie, unnatural silence. A cluster of young people, university students, presumably were milling outside the open front door of 1122 like gulls on a beach, and yet they were exceptionally quiet. They weren't merely subdued. They seemed stunned, as if they were drained by deep and intense shock. When the 3 mystified officers approached the front door, someone in the crowd, it would later be shared, muttered they muttered a single plaintive word: dead. Still, Gunderson would confess to others he was unprepared for the strong smell of blood that rose up in his nostrils the moment he walked inside. The coroner, who had once been an emergency room nurse in interviews as chaos, lots of blood, trigger warning, few others would even attempt to put it into words. So imagine if they smelled so much blood and there was so much chaos, how come the surviving roommates did not smell that blood? Let's not forget they slept at the house. I saw the person who could have done these horrific crimes. She said she saw someone with a black mask, black clothing, bushy eyebrows, someone who told Xana, allegedly. The reason I say allegedly is nobody knows, because this is all DM statements. She heard somebody telling Xana, it's all right, I'm here to help. So how come they didn't? Something is not right. There are moments cops will tell you that are too profound, too unnerving to be experienced in the present. All you can do is move forward. There will be time later to try to make sense of it all. Procedures take precedence. It allows between the real and the too real. All other thoughts, all other feelings become extraneous. Trigger warning. There was so much blood, it had seeped through the wooden floors and run down the building's grey concrete foundation in jagged red rivulets. These two officers, largely mute, almost robotic in their movements, now stepped carefully across the blood-streaked wooden floor and proceeded to inspect a crime scene. Wedged against a hill, the house rose up on 3 distinct levels from a platform base-like. And so Gunderson and his two officers, largely mute, almost robotic in the movements, now stepped carefully across the blood-streaked wooden floor and proceeded to inspect a crime scene. Wedged against a hill, the house rose up on 3 distinct levels, set out to inspect each floor. They moved cautiously, not knowing what they'll find. Yet, of course, by now they knew. The first floor, nevertheless, was a surprise. There were 2 bedrooms and they anxiously entered each one. There was no sign of anything out of ordinary. Later, they would learn that the 2 universities, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, had apparently slept obliviously through the carnage. It was an explanation that made no sense. Unless one's life had been informed by the experience of being a college student who curled up in a bed after a long night of drinking. I doubt, because the smell of the blood was too much. For even if they were sleeping, it doesn't make any sense at all. And this was the first explanation of the roommates. When they saw that it did not make sense, the police, something happened that the statements were changed. This is just my opinion. Everything is changed here from a targeted. However, as the stage ring day wore on, Mortensen would reveal more about what had happened that night. She told the authorities she heard crying, opened her bedroom door and saw a man in black clothes and a mask walking past her, and bushy eyebrows, let's not forget. Frozen and in shock, she stood immobile as he headed towards a sliding glass door at the back of the house, and then inexplicably she returned to her room and locked her door till the morning. But now we are hearing that the roommates allegedly were texting each other. But in the daylight, things turned frantic. Mortensen and Funk first stirred from their beds. Sometime after 11 a.m., they found it impossible to rouse their roommates and call friends. Does that mean they touched their roommates? Because it's written here, they found it impossible to rouse their roommates and call friends for assistance. More like they call the Sigma boys for assistance. Those are not friends. And then in the torrents of confusions after the friends had arrived, Sigma Chi again, now friends have arrived, one of their. And then in the torrents of confusion after the friends had arrived, one of the cell phones was called to make the agitated 911 call that resulted in the unconscious person. Message which was relayed to Gunderson. The trio of officers meanwhile proceeded with haste on the second floor. They opened the bedroom door to find two dead bodies, a male and a female. The pair were gruesomely drenched in blood, yet both their good-looking faces had oddly been preserved like masks. Strange. May they rest in peace. Even at that, the trio of officers meanwhile proceeded with haste to the second floor. They opened the bedroom door to find two dead bodies, a male and a female. The pair were gruesomely drenched in blood, yet both their good-looking faces had oddly been preserved like masks. Even at the probing moment, it was difficult. One of the young officers would later nearly wail to look at the 20-year-old pair. Xana Canodal, a grave, sad-eyed beauty who was a Pi Beta Phi, and her happy-go-lucky, tously-haired Sigma Chi boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, a triplet from Conway, Idaho, whose surviving brother and sister also attend the university, and not consider the glow of the once rich promise that had been so viciously extinguished at her high school graduation in Post Falls, Idaho. Xana had confidently written on her motorboat. Xana had confidently written on a motorboat, "For the lives I will change." Poor girl. On the third floor, things got, if possible, worse. In one bedroom, lying in a single bed, were two inert women, Madison Morgan and KAYLEE Congavs. May they rest in peace. They might have been sisters, so similar with the 21-year-old's pretty Barbie doll-like sculpture features, their long cascades of thick, streaked blonde hair falling down to their narrow shoulders. Yet in death there was one gruesome difference. KAYLEE, it would be reported, had been hacked with a particular ferocity. It was as if her wild assailant, or was it assailants, had been intent on gouging out chunks of her flesh. Trigger warning, guys. Large punctures was how the lacerations had been described. Maddie's wounds, while no less fatal, appeared less feral, more measured and least in comparison. Across the narrow hallway was one final door. The officers pulled it open, and at last they discovered a sign of life. A fluffy caramel-colored dog. It was Murphy, KAYLEE's Frisky. Across the narrow hallway, on one final door, the officers pulled it open, and at last they discovered a sign of life. A fluffy caramel-colored dog. It was Murphy's KAYLEE's Frisky Labradoodle. He was unharmed, not marred by even a speck of blood or small consolation, and barely one at that, for all they had seen and were only beginning to process. Poor officers, I can imagine. A major case, and it was still the same long day of the frenzied moments and then hours that followed and that seemingly Minable Sunday, there is only so much that can be retrievability, reported even Gunderson, and his team lost track of all the efforts in the hectic swell of events. Yet Gunderson called his boss, Captain Roger Lanier, the head of the 24 office, unexpectedly for Sunday, sitting down to lunch with his family. Lanier was a veteran cop. He had spent more than 20 years on the force in nearby Lewiston, before having been launched 6 years early to Moscow with the captain's rank after all these years. And it was still the same year. Okay, Gunderson quickly called his boss. We've read that. But quickly Lanier's professionalism took control. He had 1,000 questions, and yet he knew that only hope of finding answers would be to follow the previously established protocols. Dutifully, he gave the orders to set up the perimeters of the crime scene, to bring in the forensic team and summon the coroner. It was standard in a major case, and for homicide wasn't a major case. What wasn't? To alert the Idaho State Police, and he did that too. Yeah, this was the captain. We've seen him before. I'll let you all read this. I'm getting a sore throat. Really apologize. The students needed to be warned at 2:07 p.m., a little over 2 hours after 3 cops had entered the blood-soaked house. The University Office of Public Safety and Security sent a vandal alert email to the students and faculties. Moscow PD investigating a homicide on King Road near campus. Suspect is not known at this time. Stay away from the area and shelter in place. A shelter in place order was required. People to take refuge in a room with no or few windows. At this point, busy hours had already quickly flown, but despite his marathon of activities, Lanier still had to succeed. Completing one task was at the top of his mental list. He had now not been able to speak with his boss, James Fry. That's Chief Fry, the chief of police. The chief had been getting death threats. He'd counted 6 of a virulent collection of unsigned letters and barking phone messages, emphatically promising he'd be killed. And those missives were in addition to the tall pile of rude and scatological, although less murderous, emails and notes had been received. The ostensible reason for these threats: he had ordered his officers to enforce the mayor and the city council's coronavirus restrictions. People had received summonses for not wearing masks in public, and at a definitely maskless prayer vigil in the city hall parking lot, several of the more reverent in the open-air assembly had been cuffed and hauled off on Fry's orders. His non-nonsense policy had made the chief a lot of enemies. Oh yeah, it was